Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show, where trusted leaders bring biblical insights to important issues to help you stand for truth and effect godly change in our nation and in our world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show. On today's program, we're going to be talking about, hands down, the most powerful way to transform a nation. I'm talking about education. Abraham Lincoln said the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. You see, what we teach our kids forms their attitude about and their mindset, not just about math in itself or history as some kind of abstract subject or other things, but it forms their worldview. And in America today, we are suffering as a nation. Our very foundations are crumbling in front of our eyes. We have riots in the streets. We have an avowed socialist leading in the election for the mayor of New York City. You know, a 2019 Gallup poll said that surveyed 1,500 Americans and found that 52% of those surveyed under the ages or between the ages of 18 and 34 had a positive view of socialism. The Cato Institute did another study in March of this year and found that 62% of adults under the age of 30 thought favorably about socialism. And I'm not here to rant on socialism. My point is that the mindset and the attitude of our country is shifting and changing in a radical direction that is inconsistent with what America was built on, that is inconsistent with the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. We are still at this time in a very serious crisis. And the root of that crisis is the lack of a biblical worldview. And the cause of a lack of a biblical worldview is that the church in America has turned over the education of the youth of this nation to an education system that is locked into ungodly, anti-biblical, and anti-American doctrines like secular humanism, moral relativism, cultural Marxism. The Bible commands that we educate our children, and it places the duty to educate our children not on the state, not on the government, but on parents and on the family. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 6 and 7 says this, "And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up." Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way that he shall go, and when he is old he will not depart from it." And then Ephesians 6, verse 4 says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord." You see, the responsibility, the God-given responsibility to educate children is on the parents. But anti-God forces in our nation and throughout the West, I'm talking about tyrants, humanists, and communists, basically. Let's just call a spade a spade. Anti-God forces have long recognized the need, the importance of controlling education. This is why in the middle and latter part of the 19th century in America, secular humanists began to advocate for compulsory public education. It sounds good. Kids need to be educated. We want them educated. But at the same time, on the backside, they were also advocating for secularization of education, to push God out of schools, to push God out not just of schools, but out of government and out of public life altogether. You see, they knew that if they could capture the minds of the youth, then and anchor themselves in that position, that it was just a matter of time before the Christian foundations of the nation would be done away with, would be outdated and expired and rejected by the culture. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, one of the leaders of the atheistic secular French Revolution that resulted in the Reign of Terror, said this. Basically, the people don't realize this today, but the French Revolution was basically a socialist Marxist revolution. It was Marxism before Marx was around. It was state control of every aspect of people's lives. He said this: submit yourself to the state. And my philosophy will liberate you from submission to intermediate authorities like the church and the family. In other words, submit to the state your education, and we will set you free from the church and family. Adolf Hitler said, the new Reich will give its youth to no one, but will itself take youth and give to youth its own education and its own upbringing. You see, the Hitler Youth. In 1963, a list of communist goals was published in the Congressional Record, read into the record by Congressman A.S. Herlong of Florida. This list of communist goals was taken from a book called The Naked Communist, written by Cleon Skousen in 1958. Goal number 17 of the communists: get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of teachers' associations. Put the party line in textbooks. The leader of the first major leader of the Soviet Union, Vladimir Lenin, said, "Give me just one generation of youth and I'll transform the whole world." I'm sorry to barrage you with quotes today, folks, but listen to this train of thought. We have got to understand the roots of public education here. John Dewey, the father of modern public education, said schools do have a role, and an important role, in what? In educating children? No. Production of social change. He said, quote, "You can't make socialists out of individuals. Children who know how to think for themselves spoil the harmony of the collective society which is coming." Wow. We've been warned, brothers and sisters, we've been warned against the secularist school agenda. Current Minister Vadi Bachman Jr. says, "We cannot continue to send our children to Caesar for their education and be surprised when they come home as Romans." Doug Wilson said, "You cannot send all the Christian kids off to be educated in a school system that is riddled with rank unbelief, shot through with relativism, and dressed up with perverse sexual fantasies, and then wonder at the results you get." Many people say today, many Christians will say, "I want my child to go to public school so he can witness to the other kids." Well, Dr. G. James Kennedy said this: "Don't send an 8-year-old out to take on a 40-year-old humanist." I have never seen any people more unhappy than the fathers or mothers who have come to me and said, "Where did we go wrong? We gave him everything, and now he's turned his back completely on everything we believe." Yes, they gave him everything that is, except a Christian education. And guys, it's not just lower education, it's higher education too. David Aikman said this: "It is a remarkable historical fact that America's major universities went from being repositories of knowledge and teaching deeply imbued with the Christian worldview in the middle of the 19th century, with few exceptions, to uniformly anti-religious and specifically anti-Christian institutions by the end of the 20th century." And William Lynn said this: "The totalitarian nature of political correctness is revealed nowhere more clearly than on college campuses, many of which at this point are ivy-covered North Koreas." Wow. Many Christian parents also think, it's okay for my child to go to public school because we go to church on Sundays and youth group on Wednesdays. Well, Paul Weber said this: Your children will go to public school and they will be trained for somewhere around 15,000 hours in ungodly secular thought. And then they'll go to Sunday school and they'll color a picture of Noah's Ark. And you think that's going to stand against the lies that they are being told? You see, guys, our kids are in public school. 85 to 90% of America's children are in public school, where they're being indoctrinated 40 hours per week in secular, humanistic, Marxist atheism. And it's Only the really dedicated Christian families that even have their kids in church every Sunday to begin with. And then of those, a smaller portion even still have them in Sunday school, and a smaller portion even still have them in youth group. And even in the best case scenario, a child that is in youth group and Sunday school on, once a week is receiving 2 to maybe 2.5 hours of Christian education compared to 40 hours per week in the secular, humanistic, Marxist, atheistic laboratory called public school. It is absurd. It is almost an insane idea to think that we're going to make disciples of this generation using this approach. Charles F. Potter said, "Education is thus a most powerful ally of humanism. And every public school is a school of humanism." This guy's a humanist. Charles Potter was. And he said, what can be the theistic Sunday school meeting for an hour once a week and teaching only a fraction of the children do to stem the tide of a 5-day program of humanistic teaching? Other Christian parents say, they may say, yeah, or people even not Christians say, our schools are failing. This is my point. They say, oh, our schools are failing. Donald Trump, our schools are failing. It's true, they are failing to properly educate. Despite per pupil spending today that is 245% greater than what it was in the 1970s, our educational outcomes have gotten far worse. Only 24 to 30% of America's school children today read and do math at grade level. Think of that. That's shocking. Only we're okay with that as a country, that our public schools that we pour billions of dollars into have only succeed in getting 1/4 of the kids to read at grade level? But in a truer sense, the schools today are not failing. They are succeeding in amazing levels. They're succeeding at what their real purpose was, their real agenda, which is to inculcate a Marxist and humanist education and to dumb down the youth of the country. Patrick Deneen said this, "Our students' ignorance is not a failing of the education system. It is the crowning achievement. Efforts by several generations of philosophers and reformers and public policy experts, whom our students and most of us know nothing about, have combined to produce a generation of know-nothings. The pervasive ignorance of our students is not a mere accident or unfortunate but correctable outcome. It is the consequence of a civilizational commitment to civilizational suicide." Do you get what I'm saying today? One of the best things, folks, to come out of the COVID lockdown was parents had the opportunity to see for the first time what their children were actually being taught. And the LGBT agenda has produced great alarm today among Christian parents. So homeschooling now has seen record increases. But still, even with the increases we've seen, and even with the parents becoming more involved, going to school board meetings and things like that, we are still in America today nowhere near discipling this nation or rescuing the youth of this nation from an atheistic education. Donald Trump is doing a lot to purge wokeism from education and to return it to the states. But there is still so much more that needs to be done and that can be done. So we have a responsibility, brothers and sisters. We have a responsibility as followers of Jesus Christ in this nation. We have a responsibility on two fronts. The first front, society at large. The second front, the kids and grandkids in our own families. Let's talk about society at large. We need to win school board elections. Trump may be sending stuff back to education back to the states, but if we don't take control of local school boards, we still will not be influencing public education. The vast majority of school boards across America are manned by progressives. The left, they understand the importance of education and they want to control it, and they are controlling the school boards. Therefore, they are controlling the curriculum and the activities and enforcing secularization in our public schools. We have got, as Christians, we must get informed and we must get involved and we must run for office on school boards and win these elections. Let's talk about our kids and grandkids. We must take charge over the education of our own children first and our grandchildren. We must get them out, and I know this is a hard saying, but we must get them out of public schools. We cannot send them there with the unrealistic justification that they're going to evangelize other children. They are too young for that, and our duty to them is not to make them young evangelists. Our duty is to raise them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord. And we cannot do this by sending them to public schools. Until the public schools are radically transformed, we must fulfill the Bible's commands to educate our own children. And the way to do that is through homeschooling. And here to talk about more about this subject today is a very special guest, Sam Sorbo. Sam is an education freedom advocate. Her mission is to help parents and their children emancipate from our modern school system. She's a successful Hollywood film actress, a writer, and a producer, but she stepped back from her own career to immerse herself in the home education of her 3 young children for over a decade. She recognizes the shortcomings of our institutional education system and has an understanding that there is much more to education than just academics. And so as a prolific author and podcast host and radio host and international public speaker and more, Sam Sorbo is dedicated to teaching families to educate differently. So we're going to take a break now and share some important information with you. And when we're back, I'm going to sit down and speak with Sam Sorbo. You won't want to miss this interview. Thank you. Are you passionate about standing for truth in the culture, but don't know how to get started? Well, Truth and Liberty, our mission is to educate, unify, and mobilize the body of Christ to stand for truth in the public square. And as part of our mission, we provide you with an amazing array of resources on our website. And our website has just been revamped, remodeled, and retooled to be user-friendly. And I'm so excited about it because I believe that there's nothing like it out there anywhere. I want to encourage you today to go to truthandliberty.net and check out the Resources Center and the Get Equipped Center. On our Resources Center, you will find hundreds of links, hundreds of videos, articles, blogs, even America's original founding documents can be found on Truth and Liberty's Resources Center. It's searchable by topic, preset topic, or you can put in a custom search to find exactly what you need and what you're interested in. In the Get Equipped section, we link you to tools created by our strategic partners, including Pray, Vote, and Engage tools. We culture impact teams, civic action teams, biblical citizenship in modern America, biblical worldview training, and more. So go today to truthandliberty.net and find what you need to get equipped to stand for truth in the public square. All right, welcome back to Truth and Liberty. And as I said, our very special guest today is Sam Sorbo. And just am so delighted and honored to welcome you on the show today. Sam, thanks for joining us on Truth and Liberty.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, Sam, you have spent years, home educating your children. And in that journey, in that process, you've learned so much about the subject of education, how to do it well, what's wrong with the way we're doing it now, and so forth, that it's hard to know just exactly where to begin. But our public education system is broken. Can you just begin by talking a little bit about why it is so bad?
Yeah, and first, I'd love to sort of reframe your statement there. I don't believe it's broken. I don't believe it's a system of education, and it's barely public, right? So we need to sort of define our terms. We have a public school system, which is a government-run school system or a factory school system that does not accomplish education because ostensibly, it was actually never intended to accomplish education. Its intent was to dumb down the proletariat so they would be good worker bees for the factories. And it has succeeded in doing that and continues to succeed. And so we call it broken at our own peril because then we get sort of caught up in the trap of trying to fix it. I don't believe that we can actually fix it to the degree that we think might be possible, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And the reason for that is because it kills a child's curiosity, which is the engine for learning. So when you fundamentally disrupt the actual engine for learning, you can't be for the education of the child. So that's where we get caught up in this sort of catch-22, where, you and I went to school. I went to public school my whole life, and I was taught that public school was good. I was taught that school was good. And I think most of us were taught that. And so it's very difficult for us to disengage from that and say, school's not good. But it really isn't. It's very detrimental for children. It's a horrible thing to do to children, to force them to sit in a classroom, to ask them to learn things that they're not interested in, while telling them, don't learn the things that you might be interested in because I don't have time for that right now. And so on and so forth. And I go into more of the sort of issues, the fundamental issues that lie just beneath the surface. We don't have to talk about testing, test results, which are abysmal. We're 40th in the world in a list of 40. So we are the worst of the worst. We spend the most out of anybody, and we still are the worst. We don't even have to talk about that. We have to talk about what lies beneath the underlying problems. And that's what I talk about in my book, Parents' Guide to Homeschool, where I work through all of that for the parents who are approaching this today and saying, I don't feel like I was that educated. Maybe I shouldn't put my child back into that system. But really, what is there out there for me? I just talked to a young man and I said, why aren't you homeschooling? You actually bring your child to work with you. So like you've got the perfect setup. And he said, well, I couldn't do the coursework that's required. And I said, what coursework is required? Yeah. Because there isn't any, right? But he thought that there was. So we have all these assumptions that we're going by that we've applied to ourselves just because of our experience in school. And they actually are non-existent. So the schools have built, in sense, a house of cards. You need a diploma to get by in the world. Why? Because they say you need a diploma. And then people think you need a diploma. But you don't need a diploma to go to college. And people are like shocked by that. Colleges never look at your diploma. They look at your track record. If it looks like you're about to graduate, that's good enough for them. I know because I didn't graduate high school and I went to Duke University.
Wow.
I also didn't graduate Duke University.
And you went to, no, yeah, fantastic. So this killing the engine of learning, killing curiosity, it's because we create this sort of one size fits all, and it's a lecture format primarily, and we're telling them what they need, we want them to know, instead of helping them to discover what they're designed to learn, I guess, right?
Amen to that. So each child is gifted with a purpose for his or her life. And what we're doing is we're dissuading them from pursuing that. We send them to school and we say, no, these are the important things. So I have a daughter who's very much an artist. There's no denying that she's an artist. And if she had been sent to school, they would have told her that art was kind of useless. And they would have given her maybe a couple of art classes here or there that would have just frustrated her, right? Yeah. And not given her the time to actually pursue her giftings, which is a travesty. In my book, I think, and every child is unique, and yet we have a one size fits all. And if you're just sort of marginally, hanging out on the margins, maybe you're not the best academic learner, but you're not that bad, then the only thing the system does is teach you how incompetent you are. And that's really that's one of the biggest ones. I mean, there's so many, but honestly, the system is designed to train you in just how incompetent you are, which is why so many parents say, I could never homeschool. I mean, I don't even know how, right? It doesn't occur to them, well, you can learn how, because they've been taught that they can only learn the things that they learned in school. And once school is done, they're done learning, which is absurd, right? If you think about it, we've all learned things post-graduation or post-school, right? We've all learned things. I mean, I had to change a toilet. I had to install a toilet. I went on YouTube and I looked up a video on how to install a toilet, and I learned how to install it, right?
That's great.
And we've all done that, right?
Yeah.
And yet we don't credit ourselves with that because we've been conditioned by the system to credit the system for all the good things and to blame ourselves for all the negatives.
Well, so maybe a little bit of the flip side, though, do you think that there's value in children getting basic understanding in subjects like, say, history, social studies or whatever you want to call it now, math, science, and so forth. Even if, say, I'm not really that interested in science, you don't necessarily let your 9-year-old totally never look at science again, right? How do you make sure that your children have what I would say, I guess, is a well-rounded education in many subjects, and also allow them to specialize in their area of passion and calling?
Yeah, so I don't know if this answer will shock you or not, but God designed education, and he tasked the parents with the education of the children.
Yep.
And he was very simple about it. He said, teach them my word. And so we are told to teach God's word to our children. Why? Because children are naturally curious. And when you teach them God's word, they become curious about that individual. And they go on a search for truth everywhere. And they will turn over every stone and every leaf to find the truth of God because he exists everywhere. And so then they will find the science. They will discover the science for themselves. They will understand that science is fascinating because God created science. They will understand that math is fascinating because he created math. And they may never achieve calculus. But and this pains me because I love calculus. But really, who needs calculus? Like, just because the school says that it has value is not true. So we have to recalibrate our value system, because the school's value system actually is money is the highest value. And we need to be very careful of that, because now we live in a culture where, I mean, I was just talking to somebody on the airplane, and her grandchild is this gorgeous little boy who's in daycare. He's 9 months old. They switched daycares because the first one it seemed a bit skeevy, and they just bought a house. So they're sacrificing, because now both parents have to work to support the house. They're sacrificing their child for the house. That's money, right? That's the system inculcating us all to chase the almighty dollar instead of chasing relationship, which is actually the design against God that I referred to before. And so, we're caught up in this this matrix, if you will, of falsities that have been woven together so craftily by a system of schooling that we don't even know what's up and what's down, in a sense. We don't know right from wrong. We lack discernment. And God's word will give a child discernment and will set a child on the right path. Now, if you're asking specifics, should parents buy, whatever science curriculum? Yeah, I think that they should, but it's hard to recommend a curriculum because so many of them have been compromised by values that don't adhere to Christian tenets. And so we have to be very careful with that. If you give a child, however, in the Charlotte Mason style, if you give a child good books that incorporate history, then those books will also incorporate science. Benjamin Franklin was entirely self-taught. I've not made this up. This is actually standard protocol up until about 130 years ago. Children were entirely self-taught. But for the most part, they were taught the Bible. They were taught reading, writing, and some ciphering, right? Arithmetic, right?
Yes.
And then after that, it was up to them. But they were still curious because their curiosity wasn't killed by this, right? This is the first thing that a child learns in school. This is what you have to do. This is the rule. You have to do this before you're allowed to learn, before you're allowed to ask a question. You need permission first. Well, that's stifling to a child that's intensely curious. It's hard for them to sit still and wait to get their questions answered. We all know this. And we think, well, that's good discipline for children. And I say, well, the discipline sometimes looks like child abuse to me. So I think that that's terrible. Whereas if you set a child free to read, you teach them to read, obviously, you read to them, then you give them those good books, they will embark on a journey of learning that you won't be able to stop after a certain point, right?
Yeah.
And that's the joy. And then you'll have somebody who's very well-rounded, like Ben Franklin, who was the most famous man in the world, because not only was he a printer and a publisher and a writer, and he wrote a lot under pseudonyms, and he was a politician, and he was a diplomat to France and to England. He's the only individual who signed all four of our originating documents. But he was also an inventor. He was a scientist. He was a world-renowned scientist because he was unstoppable,
Yeah.
because he didn't let schooling get in the way of his education, as Mark Twain puts it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, the Bible says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And it also says that the entrance of thy word, O Lord, giveth light. And I think that, but by and large today, Christian families across the country are sending their kids to schools where they're taught, that they evolved from a primordial slime. You can't even refer to God, much less quote the Bible, or even refer to the Bible. Our history books have been purged from the Christian foundations of the nation and even become anti-American and against the founding principles and all these other things that we can say. Is it just purely delusional for parents to think that they can send their kids to public schools and actually raise them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord at the same time?
Well, yes, but more than that, we don't have a system of education. So why are you sending your child to a school, right? Ostensibly, you're sending your child to a school so that they can get an education, but you can't tell me that you're educating a child and hiding the most important book in the history of the world, regardless of your religion. It's the most important book in the history of the world. It is a historical text that has been verified in multiple ways, right? It's probably the most verified historical text, and yet we hide it from children and we disdain it in our schools. And so any Christian parent can't, in good conscience, send a child to a non-Christian school, full stop, because they're not about education. And here's the thing. So Shakespeare is so much Bible in Shakespeare. You can't understand Shakespeare without a thorough knowledge of the Bible. You can't understand our founding documents without a thorough knowledge of the Bible. You can't understand Milton without a thorough knowledge of the Bible. There's so much history that you won't be able to understand without a thorough knowledge of the Bible, including your own. And so yes, it's sort of it's a bridge that you can't cross. And yet we do it every day. And we have pastors in this country who simply turn a blind eye. They don't pay attention to it. They applaud it even. And they're afraid because they have teachers serving in their congregations. But those teachers can't be real Christian, because how can they be Christian and be working in an environment that doesn't uphold the Bible as just as a source text? So they've got a conundrum on their hands. And we've been lulled into this sense of, well, it's just for now, or I'm being salt and light. And I get that to a certain degree. But at some point you have to figure out if your acceptance of their condemnation of the Bible is actually doing more good or harm. And that's the problem that we face, right? Because I believe it does more harm. Certainly to the children it does harm.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the whole point that I don't think we've really talked about yet today, which is that in the government schools, it's not neutral, right, with respect to God, with respect to our faith. Let me ask you this. I don't think neutrality is possible when it comes to God. I think you're not able to educate from a neutral position. Your education is going to be influenced by a worldview. Whether you intend it or not, it will be. But in the public schools, we actually have intentional indoctrination in atheistic, secularistic, material, humanistic, on and on, whatever adjectives you want to use. So can you comment on that there's no neutrality in education when it comes to God?
Sure. Every school is a religious school.
There you go. Wow.
And
yeah.
here's the thing. So I'm fighting on behalf of parents. I formed an organization called Parents Demanding Justice Alliance. And we're fighting for the right of the parent to speak at the school board meeting. And during COVID, and even after that, continuing to today, we have parents who spoke at school board meetings, used words, and they were accosted by their school boards, by their local law enforcement, and by the federal government under Merrick Garland, who actually had the audacity to call them domestic terrorists and send the FBI after them. Now, he maintained that it was only for the, quote, violent parents, but there were no violent parents. I don't care if the school boards feared the words of those parents, there was no cause for that. And many of these parents have been suffering tremendously because of the vindictive nature of these school board members and their local law enforcement personnel. And so I'm fighting for their right? But we have a bigger fight even. And the reason that I'm involved in this is because I believe in parental rights. I believe that parents should be the primary educators for their children. And I know that statistically, the number one indicator for a child's academic success, and I know that the entire education discussion in the nation is purely academic. We don't talk about morality because that's a different religion than what the government pursues, okay? And you're right, it's all religious, and they don't understand that they have a different religion than our religion. But we need to understand that they have a religion, and their religion is to separate the children from their parents, to marginalize the parents so that they can have sex with the children. That's ultimately the goal. And we need to be very frank about this because these children are highly, highly at risk. When they are saying that they can trans children, when California currently is actually considering a bill called I think it's called the Parental Rights Act, which seems to be fabulously named, except that it really should be called the Pedophilic Rights Act, because it's for the right of the pedophile to declare that he's the guardian of that child, to declare it without any proof whatsoever, with an ID and a document that he has signed saying either that he talked to the parents and they gave him that permission, or he couldn't reach the parents and so he's just usurping that permission. And now he has the right to get the child medical care, to enroll the child in a school, to take the child out of school. This is something that is actually being considered in the state of California today.
For I'm sorry to interrupt you, Sam, but yeah, this is really important. It's what's the number on it? Do you remember? It's House Bill 450 something.
I think it's 495.
495, and this someone can self-declare them to be a guardian over a child and obtain authority legally to do things like this, even without parental consent, right? Or a judge.
Without parental knowledge.
Yeah.
Without parental, not because all they need to say is, well, I tried to reach the parents, but I couldn't.
Uh-huh.
And I'm asking, okay, is there a box that they check that they're not a pedophile? Just wondering, like, can they self-declare themselves not a pedophile? And by the way, who cares? They can identify any way they want, right? In the state of California, it's a trans sanctuary state. So I'm just saying that they're coming after the kids.
Yeah.
And if we don't continue to afford parents the right to speak on behalf of their children, and I'm just saying, speak. Like, I would love them to be able to act on behalf of their children, but that's slowly being eroded also. Then who's standing in the way? Mm-hmm. Who's standing in the breach on behalf of these kids? Mm-hmm. And, the Bible's pretty clear about you coming after kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so can we flip back to homeschooling for just a second, Sam? I think many parents, I know when we were first looking at it, when our kids were younger, it was kind of intimidating, like, whoa, gosh, how much work is this going to be? I was going to the office every day for my job or whatever. I wasn't going to be around. And my wife was like, but I don't know how to do this, and there were some people in our lives that were experienced homeschoolers, and they were very encouraging and allowed us to kind of discover that, hey, we can do this. And but do you have any words of encouragement for families out there about, you can do this, and here's why, it's not as difficult as you think, there's resources. What would you say? What's your word of encouragement?
Okay. So I have a really pat answer for that, but also I'm happy to go into detail. But God gave you your children, and he factored in your stupidity, and he's charged you with their education.
Hallelujah.
So he believes in you. Who am I to say that he's wrong? And frankly, who are you to doubt him? Okay. So as Christians, we need to have a little bit more faith, and we need to read our Bibles, and we need to understand that children have an engine inside them that drives them to learn. But we've lost that faith because we went to school, and in school we were taught that learning is boring. So the best advice that I have is, of course, go pick up my book, Parent's Guide to Homeschool, because that should, if you do the book, it's a workbook, That should, here, I have it right here actually. That should set you free from this compulsion that you have to follow the rules that you learned in school. And so, I'll show you. So it's got a lot of like fill in the blanks, if you can sort of tell.
Yeah.
It's actually really pretty.
Yeah,
So
it's nice.
so the idea is it goes through the different issues that the school has, and then it sets you free from each of those and says, but this is how you combat that. This is how you handle that. And what we ought to be doing is sort of taking a step back and looking at the big picture. Where do we want to see that child? What is it, 12, 13 years from now? And of course, I was dead set on my kids all going to college. It turns out they're so smart, none of them went to college. And actually, I'm on board with that now. But back then, I thought college was good. Now, of course, we all see the output of the colleges and we're going, wait a minute, this is like a Ponzi scheme. Like,
Yeah.
and by the way, like they've got 13 years
Progressive
with
and
your
wicked.
kid.
Yeah.
They've got 13 years to convince you to spend a ton of money to convince that kid to convince you, right? To spend a ton of money like in a pyramid scheme. You pay in a bunch at the beginning, and then when you get out, you reap like a lot of money on the other side, except it's not paying out like they promised.
Right.
It's just not anymore.
Right.
So we need children who are raised outside the box, who are educated outside the box, who can think through problems. What we're doing in schools is we're teaching children to solve pre-solved problems. And that's not going to end well because we don't have pre-solved problems in the world. We have actual problems in the world. And homeschoolers get to solve actual problems in the world because typically the parents are a little bit more hands off and not like hovering over them and giving them the answer, which is what happens in schools. And so Harvard and Yale and Princeton and the top universities are now actually recruiting homeschoolers because they understand that these kids are like faster thinkers. They're more adept. So I know that it seems like you can't. And the guy that I talked to the other day, who I mentioned, and he said, well, I don't know how to do the curriculum that they'd want me to do. There is no curriculum. You get to design the curriculum. I go into that in my book, and the idea is you need to think big picture. What's the best life that you can envision for your child? You're not supposed to tell a child the way he should go. You're supposed to raise a child in the way that he should go. And that proverb actually refers to finding that child's gifts and helping him exploit his own gifts to fulfill his purpose. Okay? And it's in our founding documents. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which actually means purpose, is the Aristotelian version of that word. It means pursuit of purpose, right? Because when you pursue your God-given purpose, you become happy. Like I'm pursuing my purpose now. It took me years to discover it, but my purpose is to help families stay together, to help them raise their children because their children are the most important thing to them. And that
Amen.
gives me my joy. And so even though it took me years to discover it, now I fulfill this purpose in this manner because I did it. And I did it for my three kids. And I cannot tell you the moment that I realized I had three teenagers and they would each come into my bedroom at night when I was home alone because my husband traveled. And they would pour out their day to me as teenagers because they sought out relationship with me because I sought relationship with them all the way through. And I never gave them up to another authority. Okay. That's the problem with the schools is they are an alternate authority that encourages your child to challenge your authority
Yeah.
because you are submitting them to an alternate authority which must be above yours.
Yeah.
There's no way that the school is below your authority. It has to be above yours or you wouldn't put them there. And so my kids sought relationship with me. And one day it occurred to me, oh my gosh, they wanted to rob me of this. And I would never have known what I was missing.
Yeah.
And my children are brilliant, and it's not my doing, it's God's doing, because we read the word every day, and that's the number one thing that you do with your kids, and you will get the rest of it right.
That's really good. Really good. You know, when we were beginning on our journey, we had this sort of intimidating thing, and someone said to us, I remember specifically the friend who was saying, you could pick and choose from different curriculum. Like you can take something from here and something from there, or you can take them on field trips and do all this. And my head was just like, what? Wait, that can't be. How would I know what's best and right? And aren't they supposed to get this box checked and this box checked and this box checked? It was so open-ended that it was challenging to accept.
Think back to your schooling,
yeah,
and how much of it really stuck. Not a lot. Like all of it is a bit of
right.
just sort of stuff, and eventually you hone in on the things that really interest you.
Right.
So why don't we just hone in on the things that really interest them to begin with, and then fill in the extra stuff later when it's a little bit more interesting to them and it'll actually stick.
Yeah.
So it's a completely different way of thinking about education, because as I said, schools don't educate, they school.
But also there's so many resources out there for parents now. It's not like in the 60s when homeschooling was still kind of a foreign concept. But
right.
There are conventions you can go to, and you'll find so much to help you. What about the parents who have very little financial resources and they feel that both of them have to work? Maybe they're just barely above minimum wage or whatever, or even the single parents. Is homeschooling an option for them? And what's your response there?
Well, what people fail to understand is you don't skip out on the responsibility when you put your child in school. You get a babysitter, but then you've got to deal with the consequences of the babysitter, and it's not a good babysitter, right? It's a bad babysitter that exposes your child to all kinds of things that you're going to have to mitigate for later. So there's that to consider. I know a single parent who was left with two young girls, and she homeschooled them all the way through while she worked full time. And she just got it done because the amount of time that it requires from you to school your child is maybe an hour a day for the younger years, maybe as much as 2 hours a day. Remember, you're not doing the homework. You're not doing the essay. You're proofing it. You're correcting it after the fact. And so, yeah, it's a responsibility to have kids, and you might need to, spend a half hour or an hour in the evening on certain evenings devising what kind of work you think your child should be doing academically, or what kind of research you think your child should be doing. But honestly, if you just give them really good books, by and large, then the rest of it sort of falls into place. So it's absolutely doable from a work management point of view for a single parent, or even if two parents work, okay? If you have to have childcare, then you need to juggle that schedule. But if you were going to be interviewing for childcare people, the school would be the last place you would want to put your child. It's like the worst daycare in the world, right? And so you got to give that some thought. Nowadays, because of COVID and some other developments, people are much more accepting of bring your child to work every day kind of thing. In fact, I know there are places of employ that offer not just daycare, but like child resources for parents who work. And so there are a couple of different ways of getting it done. If it's two-parent household, I've also known couples where he works nights, she works days, so that and he homeschooled the kid, actually. And he just moved to night shift so that he could be at the end of his shift, he would come home, have breakfast with the kid, homeschool him. She'd be off to work and he'd go to sleep. So there are plenty of different ways of doing it. What I advise parents is, if you're considering it, just sign up for the first semester. Just sign up for half a year. Give it a shot. And then sign up for another half year, right? Don't commit to, all the way through college. Like, don't just say, well, I'm going to do all the way through college. And frankly, like, don't think that you won't have second thoughts. I did. I homeschooled for a year and a half, and I was killing it. And I didn't feel like I was killing it because the school made me feel so inadequate. And so I brought my boys to a little tiny private Christian hybrid school where I was going to part-time homeschool, and then they were going to be in the classroom, learning the real good stuff from the teacher kind of thing. And I brought my second grader in, and I said to the headmistress, he's he's really good in math. He's advanced in math because he loves math, but he's remedial in reading. And I did the best I could. Please don't kill the messenger, but here he is. She said, well, you know what? Let me test him and see where he, ends up. And she came back in. She said, so he's second grade? And I said, yeah. She said, well, I mean, he is doing fourth grade math. So
Yeah.
that's pretty good. And I said, yeah, I mean, he's my little math guy. And then she goes, but he's reading at a fifth grade level. And I looked, I was like, so I'm the one with the problem?
Yeah.
She said, yeah, uh-huh. And so that's what I'm trying to tell parents. You're the one with the problem. There's no problem. Your problem is a complete invention in your head. I know it's hard to hear that because it feels so real. I mean, it felt real. It felt so real that even though she told me that I was absolutely killing it, okay, he was fifth grade level as a second grader. I left him there. I still enrolled him for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And then after 6 weeks, I pulled him out and they had killed his desire to learn math.
Ah. Wow.
And boy, did that beat me. I was, that floored me for a week. And then I got him back on track. But that really, so you have no idea what's happening in the classroom, which is why I would never submit my child to an alternate authority that I didn't, know intimately, whose house I hadn't had lunch at or dinner at. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody that I really knew. And even then, right, all bets are off. But yeah, I didn't not turn back. I was Lot's wife. And I'm just lucky. 6 weeks later, I pulled them back out again, and then I never looked back. And somebody at a speaking engagement came up to me and said, "Isn't it wonderful that God allowed you to make that mistake to prove to you that you're enough?" And so that's my message to parents: is you're enough, and your children need you. And not only that, they love you and they want to be you. Okay, and your job is to show them how to be you. Your job is actually to show them how to be a better version of you, right? And that's hard because they're calling you to be a better version of yourself. And so it's easier to send them to somebody else so that you're not reminded of what a, scumbag you are, basically, right? How you fail, how you fall short. Because your kids will point out, they will highlight all your shortcomings.
Yes.
But actually they're calling you to a better you. And you shouldn't squander that because that's opportunity. That's God's opportunity, actually. And so when you keep them with you, then you have that opportunity and the opportunity to minister to them, which is what God's ideal is your children worship you when they're little. And the ideal is that eventually they transfer that worship up because you are God on earth to them. And then eventually they go, well, I need a father in heaven. And that's what we want for our children. That's the ultimate goal, right? So why would we allow the schools to get in the way of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So much to think about in that answer. We have 3 boys. Our 2 are they're out of the house now. Our youngest is 15. And here in Colorado, they require you to do standardized testing every 2 years or some lengthy kind of other type of evaluation. So we just do it. But anyway, our youngest he's entering high school and he just tested it like freshman or sophomore in college level for reading. And it's not that, we are some geniuses and have, really done it. It's just they learn so much better in a home environment, I think personally, and more efficiently. Don't you think, Sam? It's like it takes much less time for them to learn when they're outside of the machine and they're just in an organic situation.
Absolutely. And just to I would sing your praises because I love that. And you've obviously done a great job of just inspiring him to learn. But let's be clear about this. At the turn of the last century, we had almost 100% literacy, and that literacy ran at college level or above.
Yeah.
So we are so dumbed down by our school system, right? That now it seems like, wow, what did you do that he's so remarkable? And you're like, well, he's no Benjamin Franklin, but yeah, he's doing pretty well. But maybe he will be the next Benjamin. But here's the thing, we single out Benjamin Franklin only because we know more of his story because they made us believe that he was a deist. He was a deist for about 6 months when he was 15 years old. It doesn't count. He's the guy who said, "Let's pray to God," for the Constitutional Convention. So, in any case, my point is they were all Benjamin Franklins. Thomas Jefferson was no slouch. He was a historian. He was a diplomat. He wrote the documents himself, like many of them. He's Monticello. He was an architect. He started a college, a university. None of them were slouches.
No.
And they were just normal, self-taught, homeschooled young men or older men, right?
Yeah.
And
well,
today,
they were young. Jefferson was 24 when he wrote the Declaration.
Exactly. And Benjamin Franklin was older. But the idea is that's sort of the ideal. That's within our grasp if we just get out of our own way. But the schools have trained us to think that we're incompetent, to think that children are naturally stupid, which they're not, to think all of these lies, which is why I wrote this book, which is basically starts out with all the lies in our schools, and there are myriad lies. The lie that you need a teacher. It's a lie, right? And yet we just think, well, if my kid needs to learn, he needs a teacher. No, he doesn't. He needs you to show him how to find answers in the book, and the answers are all in the book. So it's much simpler than we make it. And the reason that we think that it's more complicated is it serves them to complicate it for us. Because then that's their job security. It's like a plumber that comes over to fix your toilet. And all he does is take the plunger and he plunges, right? But he's not going to show you that because he wants his job security. So he says to you, well, first you have to do the tank, and then you have to do this other thing, and then you have to do this other thing. It's very complicated. Why don't you just go away and I'll fix it, and then when you come back, it'll be done, right?
Yeah.
And you go, yeah, okay, because I'm dumb. Because the school taught me I can't learn anything.
Yeah. Well, Sam, thank you so much. I want to give you a chance also. Tell folks about your show. You have a podcast that you do, right?
Yes, I do the Sam Sorbo Show. You can go to samsorbo.com to find out all the information on that. It's everywhere podcasts are shown. It's a video podcast, and I focus primarily on education because that is my happy space. And I'm just trying to help parents preserve families and have happier children.
And then also you've got a foundation called They're Your Kids Foundation. Can you tell us about that real quick, about 20 seconds?
So They're Your Kids Foundation supports homeschooling and messaging going into the culture regarding homeschooling. So that's basically what I do. And we support homeschooling events across the nation and things like that. And we're also supporting Parents Demanding Justice Alliance because we need to protect and preserve parental rights. And so we're asking this administration to issue an executive order. We're actually targeting October 4th because that's the 4th anniversary of the domestic terrorist termination. And we need to see that reversed. We need to see restitution for these parents. So we've made it a 501c3 so we can fundraise to afford bringing some of these parents to Washington to speak, for instance. We just had a press conference on the steps of the Capitol. And
Sam, I'm so sorry that we're out of time. We got 5 seconds left. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for watching today. We'll see you again next time. Be sure to check out samsorbo.com.